My name is Nadia, and I am 32 years old. I still remember standing outside my sister's new house last Thanksgiving, hearing laughter pouring through the windows while I stood alone in the cold. My parents had just handed her $50,000 for the down payment. I always believed family was the safest place on earth, but sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most become the ones who hurt you the deepest. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Now, have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Let me tell you my story. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, I learned early that love in my family was not distributed equally. My father worked as an accountant at a local manufacturing company, spending long hours with numbers and spreadsheets. My mother worked part-time as a nurse at the community hospital, always tired but somehow finding energy for my younger sister Brooke, who came along 4 years after me. From the outside, we looked like any other middle-class American family. A modest 2-story house with a front porch, a backyard with an old oak tree, and family dinners on Sundays. But inside those walls, there was an invisible line that separated me from the rest of them. I was a quiet child. While other kids ran around the playground screaming and laughing, I preferred sitting under the big tree with a sketchbook in my hands. I would draw for hours, losing myself in worlds I created with pencils and crayons. My teacher said I had talent. My parents said I was strange. Brooke was everything I was not. She was loud and bubbly, with golden curls that bounced when she walked, and a smile that could light up any room. She knew exactly what to say to make my parents beam with pride. When she joined the cheerleading squad in middle school, my mother told every neighbor on our street. When I won the regional spelling bee, my father nodded and asked Brooke about her upcoming dance recital. The pattern was established before I even understood what was happening. Brooke's birthdays were events. There would be themed parties with custom cakes, a house full of friends and decorations that my mother spent days preparing. My birthdays were quiet dinners where my father would check his watch, and my mother would serve store-bought cake after a meal she did not seem excited to cook. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself that some children are just easier to love, and maybe I needed to try harder to be lovable. The moment that changed everything for me happened when I was 12 years old. I had entered a statewide art competition without telling anyone because I had learned that sharing my achievements only led to disappointment. When my piece was selected as the first place winner, I was invited to a ceremony in Columbus to receive a gold medal and a small scholarship for art supplies. I told my mother about it 2 weeks in advance. I circled the date on the kitchen calendar with a red marker. I reminded her 3 times. On the day of the ceremony, I woke up early and put on my best dress. I waited in the living room with my art supplies bag packed, watching the clock tick closer to the time we needed to leave. At 9:15, my mother came downstairs in her pajamas and asked why I was dressed up. I reminded her about the ceremony. Her face went pale for a moment. Then she sighed and said she had promised to take Brooke shopping for a dress for the school play. Brooke needed the dress today because the play was in 3 days. The ceremony would have to wait. I told her the ceremony would not wait. It was happening today at 11, and I had won first place. She looked at me with something between pity and irritation. Then she suggested I take the bus. So I did. I rode 2 buses for almost 2 hours to get to Columbus. I walked into that auditorium alone while every other child had parents sitting proudly in the audience. When they called my name and handed me that gold medal, I smiled for the photograph and felt absolutely nothing. On the bus ride home holding that medal in my hands, I made a decision. I would stop expecting anything from my parents. I would stop hoping for their attention, their pride, their love. If they could not see me, then I would learn to see myself. That night, I put the medal in the bottom drawer of my dresser, underneath old sweaters and forgotten toys. I did not show it to anyone. No one ever asked. The years that followed only confirmed what I already knew. When Brooke wanted a car for her 16th birthday, my parents bought her a used Honda Civic with a red bow on top. When I turned 16, they gave me a card with $20 inside and told me to save it for college. When Brooke needed help with her homework, my mother would sit with her for hours at the kitchen table. When I asked for help with my calculus, my father told me to figure it out myself because that was how people learned. I figured it out. I figured everything out on my own. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being angry about it. I just accepted that this was how things were. Brooke was the daughter they wanted, and I was the daughter they had. By the time I graduated high school, I had learned to need nothing from them. I had earned good grades through my own determination. I had found comfort in my art and books, in the few friends who saw me for who I was. And I had a plan. I was going to leave Ohio and never look back. The day I left for college in Boston was the day I truly understood how alone I was. My parents had taken the day off work to drive Brooke to cheerleading camp 3 hours away. For me, they offered a quick goodbye and the suggestion that I could handle the 12-hour drive myself. So at 18 years old, I packed everything I owned into the back of an old Toyota Corolla that I had bought with money saved from 3 years of babysitting and part-time jobs at the local ice cream shop. I had exactly $300 in my checking account, a partial scholarship that covered half my tuition, and a heart full of determination. The drive to Boston took forever. I stopped twice at rest areas to stretch my legs and eat peanut butter sandwiches I had packed in a cooler. I watched the flat Ohio landscape turn into rolling Pennsylvania hills, and then the dense forests of New York and Massachusetts. Each mile felt like I was shedding a layer of the life I was leaving behind. When I finally arrived at my dorm room, I stood in the doorway and cried, not from sadness but from relief. This tiny room with its narrow bed and small desk was mine. No one here knew that I was the invisible daughter. No one here had already decided I was not worth seeing. College was hard in ways I had not anticipated. The partial scholarship covered tuition, but everything else was my responsibility. I took 2 jobs immediately. From 5 in the morning until 8, I worked at a coffee shop near campus, learning to make espresso drinks and memorizing the orders of regulars who barely looked at me. In the evenings, I tutored high school students in math and English, sitting in their family homes and watching them receive the attention I had always craved. I chose graphic design as my major because it combined my love of art with practical skills that could actually earn money. My professors were encouraging in ways my parents had never been. They saw potential in my work and pushed me to develop my own style. For the first time in my life, people noticed what I could do. But the struggle was constant. There were nights when I counted the coins in my wallet to see if I could afford a real dinner or if it would be instant noodles again. There were times when my classmates talked about spring break trips and summer internships in exciting cities, while I calculated how many extra tutoring sessions I would need to cover next month's rent. I never called home to ask for money. I never called home for much of anything. When I did call, usually on Sunday evenings, my mother would answer and immediately launch into updates about Brooke. Brooke had made the dean's list. Brooke was dating a nice boy from a good family. Brooke had gotten a new car because the old one had too many miles. Meanwhile, I was walking 30 minutes to campus each day because I could not afford the bus pass. My father rarely came to the phone. When he did, his conversations were brief and uncomfortable, as if he did not know what to say to me and had no interest in figuring it out. I graduated summa cum laude. I walked across that stage in a cap and gown I had paid for myself, received my diploma, and looked out into an audience where my parents' seats were empty. They had said the trip was too long. They had said they would celebrate with me when I came home for the summer. I did not go home that summer. I stayed in Boston and took an entry-level position at a small design firm that specialized in branding for local businesses. The pay was barely enough to cover rent in a shared apartment with 3 other women, but I did not care. I was building something. I was becoming someone. Over the next 6 years, I worked harder than anyone I knew. I arrived at the office before my bosses and left after everyone else had gone home. I took on projects that others avoided, the difficult clients and the impossible deadlines. I learned everything I could about digital design, user experience, and brand strategy. I volunteered for professional development courses and spent weekends building my portfolio with personal projects. By the time I was 28, I had been promoted to senior designer. My salary had nearly tripled from my starting position. I had moved into my own studio apartment, small but entirely mine. And I had managed to save $20,000 money I was setting aside for a down payment on a home of my own someday. Through all of this, I maintained contact with my family. I called every week, even when the conversations left me feeling hollow. I sent birthday cards and holiday gifts. I liked Brooke's photos on social media, watching her life unfold in a series of filtered images that showed engagement parties and bridal showers, and eventually a wedding to Marcus, a man who sold cars at a dealership in our hometown. I was not invited to be in the wedding party. I flew home for the ceremony and sat in the third row watching my sister walk down the aisle on my father's arm. At the reception, my mother introduced me to family friends as her other daughter, the one who lives in Boston. I smiled through all of it. I had learned long ago how to smile when it hurt. When I tried to talk to my parents about my own life, about my promotions and accomplishments, they would nod politely and change the subject. When I mentioned that I was saving for a house, my father laughed and said I should focus on finding a husband first, since it was hard to buy a house on a single income. I did not mention that my single income was probably higher than his and my mother's combined. I kept hoping that someday they would see me, that someday they would recognize how far I had come on my own, without their help, without their encouragement. I thought that maybe if I achieved enough, if I proved myself beyond any doubt, they would finally look at me with pride. I did not realize yet that some people are not looking because they have already decided what they want to see. 2 years after Brooke's wedding, I received a phone call from my mother inviting me home for Thanksgiving. It had been almost 2 years since I had visited Ohio. Work had been busy, and truthfully, the thought of going home filled me with anxiety I could not fully explain. But this time, my mother sounded different. She said the whole family would be together, that it would mean a lot to her if I could make it. I booked a flight that cost more than I wanted to spend and took 3 days off work, something I rarely did. I packed gifts for everyone, including a beautiful cashmere scarf for my mother and a leather wallet for my father. For Brooke and Marcus, I had chosen a nice bottle of wine and a gift card to a restaurant I knew they liked. The flight from Boston to Cleveland was short, just over 2 hours. I rented a car at the airport and drove the familiar roads to my hometown, past the high school, where I had felt invisible, past the coffee shop, where I had worked summer jobs, past the library, where I had spent countless hours hiding from my loneliness. When I pulled up to my parents' house, I sat in the car for a moment, just looking at it. The white siding had faded to a pale gray. The oak tree in the front yard had grown taller. The porch swing where I used to read was still there, swaying slightly in the November wind. Inside the house smelled like roasting turkey and cinnamon. My mother hugged me briefly and immediately started talking about how tired she was from cooking. My father was in the living room watching football, and he waved without getting up. Brooke and Marcus had not arrived yet. I helped in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and setting the table, falling into old patterns that felt both familiar and foreign. My mother chatted about neighbors I did not remember, and church events I had no connection to. She did not ask about my job or my life in Boston. When Brooke arrived with Marcus, the energy in the house shifted immediately. My mother rushed to embrace her, exclaiming about how beautiful she looked, how healthy, how happy. My father actually stood up from his chair to shake Marcus's hand and clap him on the back. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching this performance of family love that I had never been cast in. Dinner started pleasantly enough. We passed dishes around the table, complimented my mother's cooking, and engaged in the kind of small talk that families make when they do not know how to have real conversations. I asked Marcus about work, and he talked at length about sales targets and difficult customers. I asked Brooke how married life was treating her, and she said it was wonderful, just wonderful. Then, between the main course and dessert, my father stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon. Everyone quieted down, and I noticed my mother was smiling in a way that suggested she knew what was coming. My stomach tightened with a feeling I could not name. My father cleared his throat and announced that he and my mother had some exciting news to share. They had been talking for months and had made a big decision. They wanted to help Brooke and Marcus get started on their future, so they had decided to give them $50,000 for a down payment on a house. The table erupted in cheers and congratulations. Brooke burst into tears and jumped up to hug my mother. Marcus was grinning and shaking my father's hand again. Everyone was talking at once about how wonderful this was, what a generous gift, what amazing parents. I sat frozen in my chair. $50,000. I thought about the 12-hour drive to Boston I had made alone at 18. I thought about the instant noodles and the early morning coffee shop shifts. I thought about graduating without a single family member in the audience. I thought about the $20,000 I had scraped together over 6 years of working myself to exhaustion. I managed to arrange my face into something that might have looked like a smile. I congratulated Brooke. I said something about how exciting it was. I listened as they discussed neighborhoods and square footage and whether they wanted a yard big enough for kids someday. No one asked how I was doing with my house savings. No one mentioned that I had been working toward the same goal. No one seemed to remember that I existed at all. After the main celebration had died down, I excused myself to get some water from the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I filled a glass at the sink. I stood there for a moment staring out the window at the backyard where I used to play alone as a child, trying to gather myself. My mother came in behind me. I heard her footsteps and forced myself to turn around with a neutral expression. Before I could stop myself, I heard words coming out of my mouth. I told her that I was also trying to save for a house. I asked if there was any possibility that they might be able to help me too, even a small amount. My mother's face changed. The warmth that had been there for Brooke vanished, replaced by something cold and dismissive. She told me that Brooke needed it more. She said I had always been able to take care of myself. She told me I should be happy for my sister, instead of trying to make everything about me. I tried to explain. I told her that I was not trying to take anything from Brooke, that I just wanted to feel like I was part of this family too. I told her that I had worked so hard, that I had done everything on my own, and that just once I wanted to feel like they saw me. My mother sighed heavily, the way she used to sigh when I was a child, and asked for things she considered unreasonable. She asked me why I always had to be so difficult. She said I was being selfish, that I had a good job and did not need their help, that Brooke and Marcus were struggling and needed the support. I was about to respond when my father appeared in the doorway. He must have heard part of our conversation because his face was red and his voice was sharp. He told me to stop this nonsense immediately. He said I was ruining a beautiful moment with my jealousy. He told me I was 32 years old and should be ashamed of myself for begrudging my sister's happiness. Then he said the words that I will never forget. He told me that honestly, I was a failure. He said I had run away to Boston and abandoned my family. He said I contributed nothing, and now I had the nerve to come home and ask for money. He said they gave the money to Brooke because she deserved it, and I did not. The kitchen went silent. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend me, to say that my father had gone too far. Instead, she nodded. She agreed with him. I looked toward the dining room and saw Brooke standing in the doorway watching. She did not say a word in my defense. She just stood there letting our parents tear me apart. Marcus was behind her staring at his shoes. I felt something inside me shatter. It was the last piece of hope I had been carrying, the secret belief that someday they would see me, love me, be proud of me. It died in that kitchen on Thanksgiving evening. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply set down the glass of water I was holding and walked out of the kitchen. I grabbed my coat from the rack by the door. I picked up my purse. I walked out of that house without looking back. I drove to a hotel near the highway, checked into a room, and sat on the bed in the dark for a long time. Then I cried. I cried for the little girl with the gold medal who rode the bus alone. I cried for the college student eating instant noodles. I cried for all the years I had spent trying to earn love from people who had no intention of giving it to me. I cried until I had nothing left. I canceled my return flight and drove back to Boston instead. I needed the time alone, the hours of highway stretching before me, to process what had happened. For the first 200 miles, I replayed the conversation in my head obsessively. My father's words echoed on repeat. Failure, selfish, do not deserve it. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. By the time I crossed into Pennsylvania, the tears had stopped, but the numbness had set in. I drove mechanically, stopping only for gas and coffee, barely registering the landscape passing by. When I finally reached my apartment in Boston, it was almost midnight. I walked through the door, dropped my bags on the floor, and collapsed onto my bed fully clothed. I did not get up for 3 days. I called in sick to work. I did not answer my phone. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, getting up only to use the bathroom and occasionally eat a few crackers. The pain was so overwhelming that my body seemed to shut down just to survive it. On the second day, I started scrolling through old family photos on my phone. I looked at picture after picture where I was standing slightly off to the side, where everyone else was smiling, but my expression looked uncertain. I looked at birthday photos where Brooke was surrounded by presents, and I was holding a single small gift. I looked at vacation pictures where my parents had their arms around Brooke while I stood a few feet away. The evidence had been there all along. I had just refused to see it. On the third day, my friend and colleague Megan called me 6 times in a row. When I finally answered, she demanded to know where I was and why I had not been at work. I tried to tell her I was fine, just sick, but my voice cracked, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. 20 minutes later, she was at my door with soup and determination. Megan sat on my couch and listened as I told her everything. The childhood filled with small rejections. The graduation no one attended. The Thanksgiving that shattered me. She did not interrupt or try to offer solutions. She just listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me a question that changed my life. She asked me why I needed their approval to know that I had value. I stared at her, unable to answer. She told me that in the 3 years she had known me, she had watched me work harder than anyone else at the company. She had seen me mentor junior designers and stay late to help with impossible deadlines. She had seen me build a career from nothing, save money, grow as a person, and maintain kindness even when I had every reason to be bitter. She asked me why the opinions of people who had never seen me should matter more than the evidence of my own life. That night after Megan left, I sat down with a notebook and a pen. I wrote down everything I had accomplished since leaving Ohio. The scholarship I had earned on my own, the jobs I had worked, the promotions I had received, the skills I had developed, the money I had saved, the person I had become. The list filled 3 pages. For the first time, I looked at my life through my own eyes instead of through the eyes of parents who had never wanted to see me. And what I saw was not a failure. I saw a survivor. I saw someone who had built a life from nothing, who had kept going when there was no one cheering her on, who had found success in a world that had given her no advantages. I saw someone worth being proud of. In that moment, I made a decision. I was done seeking approval from people who would never give it. I was done measuring myself against standards set by those who had already decided I was not enough. I was done living my life trying to prove something to people who did not care. From now on, I would live for myself. The transformation did not happen overnight, but it started immediately. I returned to work with a new focus, channeling all the energy I had wasted on hoping for my family's love into building the life I wanted. I started taking better care of myself. I joined a gym and began working out in the mornings before work. I started eating real meals instead of grabbing whatever was quickest. I read books about healing from toxic family dynamics and found comfort in knowing I was not alone. At work, I threw myself into new challenges. I took on a freelance project, redesigning the brand identity for a boutique hotel, working nights and weekends to create something I was truly proud of. I enrolled in an evening course to learn advanced user experience design, expanding my skill set beyond what my current job required. My portfolio grew, my confidence grew. My sense of self separate from my family's opinions grew stronger every day. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, I received an email that would change the trajectory of my life. A startup technology company in San Francisco had seen my portfolio online. They were looking for someone to lead their design team, someone with vision and drive who could help them build a product from the ground up. They wanted to know if I would be interested in having a conversation. I almost deleted the email. San Francisco was on the other side of the country. It would mean leaving Boston, the city where I had rebuilt myself, the friends I had made, the life I had created. But something made me pause. I remembered the decision I had made in my apartment that night. Living for myself, taking chances, believing I deserved good things. I replied to the email. 2 weeks later, I flew to San Francisco to meet with Derek, the CEO of the startup. He was passionate and intense, describing his vision for a platform that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their online presence. He showed me mock-ups and prototypes and explained the problems they were trying to solve. Then he asked me what I would do differently. I spent the next hour walking him through my ideas, sketching concepts on a whiteboard, explaining design principles and user psychology. I forgot to be nervous. I forgot to second-guess myself. I just talked about what I knew and loved. When I finished, Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he offered me the job. The title was Head of Design. The salary was 3 times what I was making in Boston. The offer included stock options in the company. It was everything I had never dared to dream of. I asked for a week to think about it. I flew back to Boston and spent days making lists of pros and cons, talking to Megan, walking through the city that had become my home. In the end, the decision was clear. This was the chance to build something meaningful, to lead a team to grow in ways I could not grow by staying where I was. And staying felt like letting fear win. I accepted the offer. The move to San Francisco was terrifying and exhilarating. I found a small apartment in the Mission District, a neighborhood full of color and energy and possibility. I threw myself into the job assembling a team of 5 talented designers and working alongside them to create something we were all proud of. The startup grew faster than anyone had expected. Our product launched to positive reviews. Users loved the interface, praising its intuitive design and beautiful aesthetics. Within 6 months, we had doubled our user base. Within a year, we had attracted the attention of major investors. When we closed our Series A funding round securing $15 million to expand the company, the stock options I had been given suddenly had real value. On paper, I was worth more than I had ever imagined, but the money was not what mattered most. What mattered was that I had proven finally and completely that I was not a failure, that my father's words had been wrong, that I was capable of extraordinary things when I stopped waiting for permission to believe in myself. Around this time, I met Ethan. He was a software engineer at a different company, and we crossed paths at an industry networking event. He was tall with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that drew me in immediately. We talked for 2 hours that first night about technology and design, and eventually about life and dreams and fears. When I told him about my family hesitantly at first, and then with more openness as I realized he was really listening, he did not try to fix anything. He just nodded and told me he was sorry that I had gone through that. He told me that from what he could see, I was one of the most impressive people he had ever met. We started dating, and for the first time, I understood what a healthy relationship could feel like. Ethan supported me without trying to change me. He celebrated my successes without feeling threatened by them. He was interested in who I was not, who he wanted me to be. During all of this, I had minimal contact with my family. I did not call them to share my new job or my move to California. I did not tell them about the funding round or the success of our product. I did not introduce them to Ethan. When my mother texted occasionally with superficial questions about how I was doing, I responded briefly and politely without offering real information. When Brooke's birthday came, I sent a card and nothing more. I was not trying to punish them. I simply no longer had the energy to maintain a one-sided relationship with people who had made it clear I was not a priority. I focused on healing, on building, on becoming the person I wanted to be, without the weight of their disapproval dragging me down. 2 years after that devastating Thanksgiving, my phone rang with a call from my mother. I almost did not answer. Our recent communications had been so sparse and hollow that I expected nothing different. But something in me, maybe the part that still remembered being that little girl who wanted her mother's love, made me pick up. Her voice was different, shaky, older. She told me that my father had suffered a minor stroke. He was stable but needed help. His mobility was limited, and she was struggling to care for him on her own. She asked if I could come home. I sat in silence for a long moment, letting her words sink in. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to remind her of all the times I had needed them, and they had not been there. Part of me wanted to ask where Brooke was, since her house was only 15 minutes away, but I did not say any of those things. Despite everything, this man was still my father. And I had learned that holding on to bitterness only poisoned myself, not the people who had hurt me. I told her I would come. Ethan insisted on coming with me. He took time off work, booked our flights, and held my hand during the journey to Ohio. Having him beside me made the return feel less like defeat and more like a choice. When we pulled up to my parents' house, I was struck by how small it looked. The house that had loomed so large in my memory seemed to have shrunk, age diminished. The siding was dingier than I remembered. The garden my mother used to tend was overgrown with weeds. Inside, the changes were even more pronounced. My father sat in a wheelchair in the living room, his face gaunt and his hands trembling slightly. He seemed to have aged a decade in the 2 years since I had seen him. My mother looked exhausted with deep circles under her eyes and a weariness in her movements that spoke of months of caregiving without support. I introduced Ethan, and my parents greeted him politely, but distractedly. My mother started talking about doctor's appointments and physical therapy schedules. My father barely spoke at all. Over the course of that first day, I learned the full situation. Brooke and Marcus had not been helping. They visited occasionally, but always had excuses for why they could not do more. Marcus had been laid off from his job 3 months earlier. They were struggling financially. And the $50,000, my mother told me the story with obvious embarrassment. Marcus had invested the money in a business opportunity that turned out to be a scam. They had lost most of it. The house they had bought with such excitement was now heavily mortgaged, and they were at risk of losing it. Brooke had been calling my parents asking for money they did not have because they had already given everything to her. Money they had never offered to me. I listened to all of this without comment. There was a strange feeling in my chest, something between vindication and sadness. I had always believed that being the favorite would make Brooke's life easier. I had not considered that being handed everything might mean she never learned to handle anything on her own. The next afternoon, Brooke came to visit. She arrived alone, Marcus apparently too embarrassed to face my parents after his failed investment. When she walked through the door and saw me sitting in the living room, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, discomfort, and then something calculating. She hugged me stiffly and said it had been too long. Then she looked at Ethan, taking in his tailored clothes and confident demeanor, and looked at me with new interest. She asked what I was doing now, noting that I seemed different, successful. I told her simply that I worked in technology in San Francisco. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She asked if that was going well. I told her it was going very well. For the rest of her visit, Brooke alternated between ignoring me and trying to extract information about my financial situation. She complained about how hard things had been for her and Marcus. She mentioned not subtly that they could really use some help. That evening, after Brooke had left, my father spoke to me directly for the first time since I had arrived. He was sitting in his wheelchair in the living room. I was gathering my things to go back to the hotel where Ethan and I were staying. My father cleared his throat and said my name. I stopped and turned to look at him. He asked if I could help Brooke. He said she was struggling, that Marcus had made mistakes, that they needed family to support them. He asked if I could loan them some money. I stood very still. I looked at this man who had called me a failure, who had told me I did not deserve support, who had given my sister $50,000 while I worked multiple jobs just to eat, who had never come to a single graduation, never called to congratulate me on a promotion, never once expressed pride in anything I had accomplished. And he was asking me for money, for Brooke. I took a deep breath. Then I spoke. I reminded him what he had said to me 2 years ago, in this very house. I told him he had called me a failure. He had said I abandoned the family. He had said I was selfish for asking if I could also receive support. He had said Brooke deserved help, and I did not. The room was absolutely silent. I continued. I told him that everything I had built alone. My education was paid for with scholarships I earned and jobs I worked. My career was built on 14-hour days and years of sacrifice. My savings came from living frugally while working constantly. I had received nothing from this family except criticism and dismissal. My mother had tears streaming down her face. My father would not meet my eyes. I told them that I would not be giving Brooke money, not because I hated her, not because I wanted revenge, but because Brooke needed to learn what I had learned the hard way, that you cannot build a life on handouts, that struggle builds strength, that she was capable of more than anyone in this family had ever required of her. I told them that I would help with Dad's medical expenses. I would arrange for a home care aide to assist Mom. I would do this because it was the right thing to do, not because I had forgotten how they had treated me. Then I said the words I had needed to say my whole life. I told them that I loved this family. I would probably always love them despite everything. But I would never again let anyone call me a failure. I would never again seek approval from people who had already decided I was not worthy. I knew my value even if they never would. I picked up my coat and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard my father say something I had never heard from him before. His voice was rough, broken. He said he was sorry. I paused at the door, but did not turn around. I told him that I heard him. And then I walked out. Ethan was waiting in the car. He did not ask questions. He just took my hand and drove us back to the hotel in silence. That night, I slept better than I had in years. It has been 2 years since that confrontation in my parents' living room. I stayed in Ohio for a week after that conversation, making arrangements for my father's care and helping my mother navigate the healthcare system. I hired a part-time aide to assist with daily tasks. I set up automatic payments from my account to cover the costs. Then I returned to San Francisco and resumed my life. My relationship with my family did not magically heal. Some damage cannot be undone. But something shifted after that day. My mother calls me more often now, and when she does, she asks about my life. She asks about my work, about Ethan, about what I am doing. She still talks about Brooke, but she also talks about me. She tells me she is proud of me, words I waited 3 decades to hear. My father does not say much. He never has. But a few months after my visit, he sent me a letter. Handwritten, which must have been difficult with his limited mobility. In it, he said he had been wrong about me. He said he did not understand why he and Mom had treated me the way they did, but he could see now that I had turned out to be someone worth admiring. He said he was sorry it took him so long to see it. I keep that letter in a drawer in my home office. I do not read it often, but I know it is there. Brooke and I have found a cautious peace. She called me a few months after that Thanksgiving to apologize. Not a deep apology, not the kind that showed real understanding of how she had benefited from our family's favoritism while I suffered, but an acknowledgement that she had not been a good sister, that she could have defended me and did not, that she was sorry. I accepted her apology without illusion. We are not close, and we may never be, but we are civil. We send birthday cards. We occasionally exchange texts about our parents' health. It is not the sisterhood I once wished for, but it is enough. The startup where I work went through another round of funding and is now valued at over $200 million. My stock options have vested. I could retire tomorrow if I wanted to, but I do not want to. I love what I do. I love leading my team, solving design problems, building products that make people's lives easier. The money is a nice security, but the work is what fulfills me. Ethan proposed to me on a weekend trip to Big Sur. We were watching the sunset from a cliff overlooking the Pacific when he got down on one knee and asked me to spend the rest of my life with him. I said yes without hesitation. We bought a house together in Napa Valley, a small place with a view of the vineyards. We paid for it ourselves, 50-50 with money we had both earned through our own work. Every time I walk through the front door, I remember what it took to get here. Megan flew out from Boston for the wedding. She was my maid of honor, the friend who had been there when I needed someone most. At the reception, she gave a speech about how I was the strongest person she knew, and I cried in front of everyone without embarrassment. My parents came to the wedding. My father was in a wheelchair, and my mother looked nervous the entire time. But they were there. They watched me marry the love of my life. And when my father shook Ethan's hand afterward, he told him to take care of me because I was special. It was the first time he had ever called me special. I did not let it heal all the old wounds. Some things cannot be healed, only accepted. But I let it matter. I let it be a small step in a long, difficult journey. Now as I sit in my home office writing this, I can see the sun setting over the hills through my window. Ethan is downstairs making dinner. Tomorrow I will go to work and do what I love. This weekend we might drive up the coast or stay home and read books in the garden. This is the life I built, not the life my parents imagined for me, not the life Brooke got handed to her, but my life created through my own determination and resilience. I want to share what I learned through all of this. Your value is not determined by the people who raised you. Their inability to see you does not mean you are invisible. Their criticism does not define who you are. Family is not always the people you are born to. Sometimes family is the friends who show up when you are broken, the partner who loves you for exactly who you are, the community you build by being authentically yourself. Success is not about proving anything to anyone. It is about becoming the person you want to be and living the life that makes you whole. And forgiveness does not mean letting people continue to hurt you. It means releasing the anger that keeps you tied to the past. It means choosing freedom over bitterness. If you are in a family where you feel unseen, unvalued, or like you do not belong, I want you to know that you are not alone. And you are not a failure. You are just blooming in a place that does not have enough sunlight. Find your own light. Become your own home. And know that you deserve every good thing that comes your way. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it? Have you ever found your strength by walking away from those who called you a failure? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this video touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next story. And remember, wherever you are watching from today, you matter. You are enough. You always have been. Thank you for being here with me. I hope the story gave you something to carry with you. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.